Now, just after 9 o'clock last night, 20 million people up and down Britain sat bolt upright in unison, and so apparently did 400 million others around the world at exactly the same time, because one of the worst and seemingly most pointless fouls ever seen in a World Cup final had just ended the glittering international career of Zidane, the French captain. But what on earth possessed him to do this to an Italian player?
They exchange words, and this is the moment that Zidane turns and bows out, quite literally, of one of the great football careers in disgrace. The officials got their act together, presumably the assistant saw it, and Zidane quite rightly goes with his head bowed when he should be walking off with his head raised. And if the World Cup is presented to him tonight, as it may well be, then I hope that he has the grace to take it with a little more humility than he showed then.
Well, here now to talk about that, former sports presenter Felicity Barr, sports psychologist Amanda Owens, who's worked closely with Premiership soccer players, and the Sun's John Gaughan. I'll throw this open to you because you know what I'm like about football, but having seen that, somebody, that wasn't just out of the blue, was it? That Italian player said something to him.
We all think that something was said because we saw just before the moment of impact, if you like, that there was something that happened between the two of them. What we don't know yet is what is actually being said, and there's a lot of speculation in the newspapers today about actually what was said to Zidane.
Didn't his agent has been now, Zidane's agent has now come out and said it was whatever was said to him by the Italian was very serious. So serious that at the moment he doesn't feel able to talk about it, but he kind of
Do we think it was racist?
Well, if it's true what it is, it's a racist slur, and I've actually heard what it's meant to be. I'm not going to repeat it on TV because obviously I don't want to get myself into a libel case with the player actually said it if it's not true, or yourselves.
Is it to do with Zidane's Algerian roots?
Yes, that's what I understand, and it's very, very harsh, and I don't condone him doing it, but sometimes, you know, you're playing sport, the passion's up, somebody says something to you which just goes over that line, and you do react in that way. I am not condoning it, but that it sometimes happens, and I think you have to see it within that context. Here's a man who's one of the greatest footballers, if not the greatest footballer of his generation, and somebody's had a vicious slur, and he's had it all his career, you know, and it's kind of, if it is racism, it is all about that thing that's happening in France at the moment. We had the riots, if you remember, and his Algerian position. And don't forget, his Algerian background kind of makes him a symbol for what France should be. The Republic should be.
Well, Amanda, you work as a sports psychologist with Premiership players. We just see the slow-mo of the attack again. What's interesting is it's very calculated.
Yes.
He knows exactly what he's going to do.
Yes.
But interestingly, it's not a foul that is going to destroy the other guy's career. He's not broken his ankle, has he?
No, I mean, he contemplated and made a cognitive decision about what he was going to do. And there are two different types of hostile aggression. And there's sort of an aggression that most, you have in sport, but that's actually hostile aggression where there's an intent to harm, but he actually calculated what he was going to do.
So you mean what you're saying is there's two different kinds of foul, if you like, in terms of a physical foul. There's something which is kind of born out of huge bad temper, like, for example, say Wayne Rooney or something like that, and something else which is much cooler, a much more determined intent.
He calculated what he was going to do. He knew. He sort of appraised the situation, thought, okay, he was provoked without a doubt. However, a player of that calibre and 34 with the amount of experience he's attained really ought to not have done that.
But that is the most extraordinary thing to me, is that if he'd been the victim of a vicious tackle, we all know that footballers react in the heat of the moment, and he would have had some sympathy that, oh yes, he's reacted to being viciously attacked to a career-threatening injury or whatever. It was the fact that it was so calculated, and he has been at the top of his career for so long. He's an experienced man, 34 years old, he's leading the French side.
And also, what struck me about it, thinking about it later, was, I mean, the Rooney foul, Wayne says he didn't deliberately step on the guy's nuts. Yes, he did. But he kind of tried to get away with it and hide it. And a lot of players do that, the little jab, the little tweak, whatever, the grip, in certain areas. Whereas that guy didn't give a stuff. That the whole world, the referee and all the linesmen saw what happened.
It seemed to me that, I think you're absolutely right, he took that moment, he walked away, and then he thought, no,
I'm not going to
take this. And then I think the only funny thing about it is that, you know, for a man who can do a precision pass right across the pitch, he didn't actually hit him in the head. So it was either deliberate or it was a terrible mistake. But I think he took that moment and just said, no,
well, I have to say
I'm not having this, which is weird.
All the lawyers on all sides of the argument are saying that until we know what happened, we can't say that the guy definitely insulted him. We can only suppose. Have you ever seen you've seen a lot of sport. Have you ever seen a foul like that?
No, never.
No.
And Zidane has done. Zidane has headbutted before.
Yeah, he's and
he's stomped on players before. But again, it's always been in that reactive
in the heat
mode.
of the moment.
Can I just ask you something about what constitutes a foul in football? Because I come to this completely open mind. If it turns out, despite the legal disclaimer that we don't yet know what, if anything, was said, but if it turns out that he did say something, and he did say something exceptionally vicious, if that turns out to be the case, does that constitute a foul in football in itself, that psychological taunt?
No. A player of that calibre and that experience really ought to have learnt to cope with that situation. I mean, it happens all the time in sport. Goading in sport. Sure. It happens to professional football.
Should it be a foul?
Yeah, well, of course, because we're trying to kick racism out of football, and we all remember at the beginning of the Portugal match, David Beckham made that speech where he had to change microphones and said, let's stamp out racism. So if, and it is a big if, of course, it was a racist slur, I think maybe that needs to be looked at. I mean, I don't think necessarily it should lessen the punishment, although there won't be any punishment because he's retired, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I do think we need to look at it.
Poor man.
Yeah, well, we don't...
You know, if we find out that it was, you know, he was goaded into it in a way that he couldn't...
Okay. Isn't the truth? We don't want racism on the terraces, and we certainly don't want it on the pitch.
Well, it just seems to me that if it's a sending-off offence to abuse the referee, maybe if it can be proven, it should be a sending-off offence to abuse another player, although I know that's incredibly hard to enforce. Very, very quickly, seeing as you're here as a psychologist and we're all sitting around, I mean, we saw a masterclass in penalty-taking last night. That's how it should be done, and France were very unlucky. Do you think we need a psychiatrist advising... Seriously, I'm not being funny here. Clearly the England players are great footballers, but they can't take penalties. Do we think that over the next 2 years before the Euro, we should get a few psychiatrists and people like you in there to get their heads straight about, you know what, a penalty's quite easy. That's why it's a penalty kick.
There are ways in which to practice penalties.
Which aren't working at the moment for us.
No, absolutely not. But I think that, again, there's a learnt experience there about the England players, and the fact they've learnt not to...
believe in themselves.
Yeah, exactly. There was a lack of belief there. And when Lampard went up and took that penalty, I just knew he was going to miss.
We knew by his face just before he took it.
The body language.
It's the sporting equivalent of impotence, isn't it? It's the fear of... It is, isn't it? It's the fear of failure.
Yes. I think also I'm working at Talk Sport at the moment, so I'm surrounded by ex-professional footballers, and football is such a closed shop, and, you know, some footballers, some coaches will have in people like yourself, others won't. That is beginning to change with the European context, people like Arsene Wenger coming in, and I think it needs to change, because sport is mostly in the head. Of course, you've got to be skillful as well, but it's your head, isn't it? That's what does it. That's why Colin Montgomery, perhaps, has never won a major.
Which leads us on to our very next interview. Thank you all very much indeed. That's fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are talking psychology still, because it plays a big part, as it always does, in every year's Wimbledon. It's...